My sister owed $640,000. My mother slid the bank notice across the white linen tablecloth and looked me dead in the eye. You are going to pay this, or you are no longer our child. I looked at her, then at my sister who was wiping away fake tears with a silk napkin, and finally at my father who nodded in agreement. Then I am not, I replied calmly. I stood up, walked out of the restaurant, and made a single phone call. 3 days later, I received 98 missed calls from my family. I did not answer a single one. I only sent one text message back. Too late. I am Chloe, 33 years old, and my family thought I was just a lonely corporate worker they could bully into submission. They had no idea I was a mergers and acquisitions liquidator for one of the most ruthless investment funds in Chicago. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your peace. The nightmare began on a rainy Friday evening at a Michelin star restaurant my parents chose for their 40th wedding anniversary. I arrived straight from my office wearing a tailored charcoal suit. My mother, Patricia, looked me up and down with immediate disapproval. She was draped in expensive jewelry, sipping sparkling water as if she owned the establishment. My father, Richard, sat beside her, already complaining about the service. Across from them sat my younger sister, Vanessa. At 30 years old, Vanessa was the undisputed golden child of the family. She was a lifestyle influencer and the founder of a supposedly booming cosmetics brand. She wore a designer dress that cost more than a reliable used car, her hair blown out to perfection, holding her phone up to record short videos of her caviar appetizer. Beside her sat her husband, Marcus. Marcus is a brilliant African-American man who served as the marketing director for Vanessa's brand. Usually Marcus had a warm and booming presence, but tonight he sat rigidly in his chair. He kept his eyes glued to his plate, looking thoroughly exhausted and deeply ashamed. For the first hour, the dinner was a typical display of my family's obsession with status. My parents spent the entire appetizer course praising Vanessa. They bragged about her follower count, her recent brand launch, and the upscale image she projected to the world. Whenever I tried to speak, my father would quickly talk over me. They assumed my job in finance was just processing spreadsheets in a cubicle. They never bothered to ask what I actually did for a living, and I never bothered to correct them. It was easier to let them underestimate me. But as the main courses were cleared away by the waitstaff, the celebratory mood evaporated. My mother did not even wait for the dessert menus to arrive. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a thick manila folder, and tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud next to the crystal wine glasses. "I need you to look at this, Chloe," my mother said. Her voice lost its festive cheer, replaced by the demanding, entitled tone she always used when she wanted something from me. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of financial documents, bank notices, and legal warnings. My eyes naturally scanned the papers with the trained efficiency of an acquisitions expert. It was a complete financial disaster. Vanessa's cosmetics brand had not just failed, it had spectacularly imploded. The documents revealed a trail of reckless spending, unpaid suppliers, and maxed-out business credit lines. Vanessa had been living a lie, funding her lavish influencer lifestyle entirely on borrowed money, while her actual sales were practically non-existent. At the bottom of the summary page, the final number was circled in red ink: $640,000. I looked up from the papers. Vanessa was suddenly crying, dabbing at her perfectly powdered cheeks. Marcus looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Your sister has run into a little bit of bad luck with her business," my father, Richard, said, waving his hand as if a massive debt was just a minor inconvenience. "The market has been tough and her suppliers are being completely unreasonable. They are threatening to seize her assets and force her into bankruptcy." "It is not my fault," Vanessa sobbed loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "The marketing algorithm changed and the packaging company overcharged me. I am a victim here, Chloe." Marcus closed his eyes and shook his head slightly, completely defeated by his wife's lack of accountability. I kept my face entirely neutral. I placed the documents back into the folder and folded my hands on the table. "That is a terrible situation, Vanessa," I said calmly. But I am not sure why you are showing this to me at an anniversary dinner. My mother slammed her hand flat against the table, making the silverware rattle. Do not play dumb, Chloe. We are a family, and family helps each other. Your sister is about to lose everything: her brand, her public image, her home. We need you to fix this. I stared at her in genuine disbelief. Fix it? How exactly do you expect me to fix a $640,000 debt? You work in finance, my father sneered. You have been saving money for years. You do not have a husband. You do not have children. You live in that modest apartment. You must have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around doing nothing. We want you to sell your assets, cash out your retirement accounts, and pay off your sister's debt. The sheer audacity of the demand hung in the air. They were entirely serious. They had spent my entire life treating me like a background character, insulting my choices and elevating my sister onto a pedestal. Now that the golden child had driven her life off a financial cliff, they fully expected me to throw myself under the bus to cushion her fall. I looked at Marcus, who finally met my eyes with a look of desperate apology. He knew this was wrong, but he was trapped in Vanessa's sinking ship. Then I looked back at my mother, whose face was a mask of cold expectation. You are going to pay this, my mother repeated, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You are going to save your sister, or you are no longer our child. We will not have a selfish, ungrateful daughter in this family. The silence that followed was heavy. They expected me to cry, to argue, to beg for their love like I used to when I was a vulnerable teenager. But I was not that girl anymore. I was a professional who dismantled failing companies for a living, and I was currently looking at the worst investment I had ever seen. Then I am not, I replied. I stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from my charcoal suit, and placed a $50 bill on the table for my glass of wine. I did not look back as I walked out of the restaurant, stepping into the cool Chicago rain. My phone was already in my hand. I had a debt to acquire. I dialed my executive assistant, Elena. She answered on the second ring, her professional tone a sharp contrast to the emotional circus I had just escaped. Elena, I need you to run a full financial diagnostic on a company called V Cosmetics. I instructed, watching the neon signs reflect off my windows. Find out which financial institution is holding their bad debt. I want to know who owns their loan supplier contracts and who is threatening bankruptcy. She typed rapidly on the other end of the line, knowing better than to ask questions. Consider it done. Do you want me to flag this for the distressed asset division? No, I replied, my voice steady. I want to acquire this debt portfolio personally through my private holding company. Find out the asking price for the distressed assets and prepare a purchase agreement. I want to be their sole creditor by Monday. I ended the call and leaned back. For years, my family had mistaken my silence for weakness. They thought they held all the power because I never bothered to correct their grand delusions. That was about to change. I was not going to argue with them or beg for their understanding. I was going to buy the very ground beneath their feet. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of my penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a luxury property worth over $3 million, purchased in cash with my corporate bonuses. My parents thought I still lived in a cramped walk up in a dangerous neighborhood. I brewed a fresh cup of black coffee and settled at my massive kitchen island, opening my personal laptop to check the damage. As I fully expected, the vicious retaliation had already begun. My phone was flooded with notifications from our extended family group chat. My mother had wasted no time. She had posted a lengthy, dramatic paragraph on Facebook tagging aunts, uncles, and cousins. It breaks a mother's heart to see the children she raised turn their backs on each other, the post read. We gave Chloe everything, and in our darkest hour of need, she walked away. Please pray for our family. Blood is clearly not thicker than water. The resulting comments were a highly predictable chorus of outrage. Relatives who had not spoken to me in a decade were suddenly chiming in, calling me selfish, arrogant, and a disgrace to the family name. Vanessa had also played her part, posting a tearful video on her Instagram story about how incredibly hard it is to run a business when your own sister refuses to support women in entrepreneurship. I felt a brief flash of disgust, but no real pain. Their public smear campaign was exactly what I expected. They needed a convenient villain to distract everyone from Vanessa's catastrophic failures, and I was the designated target. But their next move was what truly made me laugh out loud in the quiet of my kitchen. I received an automated email alert from the regional bank I had used during my college years. My parents were joint account holders on that specific account, a requirement they had forced upon me when I was 18, so they could constantly monitor my spending habits. I had stopped using it the day I graduated, but I kept it open with a minimal balance just to avoid the agonizing hassle of dealing with them. The alert informed me that my parents had officially frozen the account. They had locked me out, leaving a petty aggressive note on the joint banking portal stating that until I learned the true meaning of family loyalty, my finances would be strictly restricted. I logged into my private wealth management portal on another tab. My net worth stared back at me, a highly diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings that dwarfed my parents' entire life savings combined. They actually believed they were starving me out by freezing an account that contained exactly $214. They thought they were cutting off my oxygen supply. They had absolutely no idea I owned the entire atmosphere. My phone rang, cutting through the calm silence of my penthouse. It was Elena. I answered immediately, taking a slow, satisfying sip of my hot coffee. "I have the data you requested," Elena reported, her voice crisp and highly efficient. "Vanessa's cosmetics company is drowning fast. She owes $200,000 to a premium packaging supplier, $150,000 to a digital marketing agency, and the remaining $290,000 is currently held by a mid-tier commercial bank. The bank is entirely tired of dealing with her continuous missed payments. They have already bundled her debt and are actively looking to sell it off to a collection agency for pennies on the dollar just to clear it from their financial books." "Excellent work," I said, setting my coffee mug down on the marble counter. "Contact the commercial bank executives first. Offer to buy the entire debt package at a 20% premium over what the standard collection agency is offering them. They will jump at the chance to recoup more of their losses. Do the exact same thing with all her suppliers. Consolidate everything under my private holding company. I will have the preliminary contracts drafted and sent over within the hour," Elena confirmed confidently. "You will legally own all her outstanding debts before the weekend is over." I ended the call and looked out at the Chicago skyline. My parents wanted to use money to control me. They wanted to use terror to bring me to my knees and force me to submit to their demands. I opened the family group chat, scrolling past dozens of hateful, judging messages from distant relatives. I certainly did not beg for their mercy. I simply typed a single calm sentence to let them know I was watching their every move. The game had officially begun, and I was going to win. "My sister owes $640,000. My mother slid a banking folder across the white tablecloth and looked me dead in the eye. "You are going to pay it, or you are no longer our child." I looked at both of them, took a sip of my wine, and replied, "Then I am not." That night, I called my bank. 3 days later, I had received 98 calls from family members. I did not answer a single one. I only sent one text message back. Too late. "My name is Chloe. I am 33 years old, and I specialize in corporate liquidations for a ruthless investment fund in Chicago. My family always assumed I was just a low-level clerk struggling to pay rent. They had absolutely no idea that I destroy failing companies for a living." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to set a firm boundary with a toxic family member who underestimated your worth. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter. My parents, Richard and Patricia, were obsessed with American high society, desperate to climb the social ladder. They poured every ounce of their affection and money into my younger sister, Vanessa. She was the golden child, a lifestyle influencer, who launched a luxury cosmetics brand. My parents funded her lavish aesthetic, treating her like royalty, while constantly reminding me that I was dull, practical, and entirely unexceptional. Tonight was supposed to be my parents' 40th anniversary dinner. We were seated in a private room at a Michelin star restaurant downtown. I had rushed straight from my office, still wearing my tailored charcoal suit. Vanessa sat across from me, draped in a designer dress that cost more than a decent car. She spent the first hour recording videos of her caviar appetizer for her followers, flipping her hair, and acting like a millionaire CEO. Sitting beside her was her husband, Marcus. Marcus was the marketing director for the brand of Vanessa, a hardworking African-American man who usually possessed a booming, confident presence. But tonight, he sat rigidly in his chair, staring at his plate with an expression of sheer exhaustion and profound shame. My parents spent the entire appetizer course praising Vanessa. They bragged loudly about her follower count, her upscale image, and her supposed business acumen to the waitstaff. Whenever I tried to speak, my father would quickly talk over me, redirecting the conversation back to the fabulous life Vanessa lived. I simply ate my meal in silence. I was used to being the background character in the Vanessa show. But as the main courses were cleared away, the celebratory mood abruptly vanished. My mother did not even wait for the dessert menus to arrive. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a thick manila folder, and tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud next to the crystal wine glasses. "I need you to look at this, Chloe," my mother said. Her voice lost its festive cheer, replaced by the demanding, entitled tone she always used when she wanted something from me. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of financial documents, bank notices, and legal warnings. My eyes naturally scanned the papers with the trained efficiency of an acquisitions expert. It was a complete financial disaster. The cosmetics brand had not just failed, it had spectacularly imploded. The documents revealed a trail of reckless spending, unpaid suppliers, and maxed-out business credit lines. Vanessa had been living a lie, funding her lavish influencer lifestyle entirely on borrowed money, while her actual sales were practically non-existent. At the bottom of the summary page, the final number was circled in bright red ink: $640,000. I looked up from the papers. Vanessa was suddenly crying, dabbing at her perfectly powdered cheeks with a silk napkin. Marcus looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Your sister has run into a little bit of bad luck with her business, my father," Richard said, waving his hand, as if a massive debt was just a minor inconvenience. "The market has been tough, and her suppliers are being completely unreasonable. They are threatening to seize her assets and force her into bankruptcy." "It is not my fault," Vanessa sobbed loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "The marketing algorithm changed, and the packaging company overcharged me. I am a victim here, Chloe." Marcus closed his eyes and shook his head slightly, completely defeated by the lack of accountability of his wife. I kept my face entirely neutral. I placed the documents back into the folder and folded my hands on the table. "That is a terrible situation, Vanessa," I said calmly. "But I am not sure why you are showing this to me at an anniversary dinner." My mother slammed her hand flat against the table, making the silverware rattle. "Do not play dumb, Chloe. We are a family and family helps each other. Your sister is about to lose everything. Her brand, her public image, her home. We need you to fix this." I stared at her in genuine disbelief. "Fix it? How exactly do you expect me to fix a $640,000 debt?" "You work in finance," my father sneered. "You have been saving money for years. You do not have a husband. You do not have children. You live in that modest apartment. You must have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around doing nothing. We want you to sell your assets, cash out your retirement accounts, and pay off the debt of your sister. You are going to pay this," my mother repeated, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You are going to save your sister, or you are no longer our child." "Then I am not," I replied and walked away. I stepped out of the restaurant into the crisp Chicago night air. I pulled out my phone and called my executive assistant, Elena. I told her to find out exactly who owned the massive debt portfolio of my sister. Over the weekend, my parents froze my college bank account and started a smear campaign on social media calling me a monster. I simply ignored them. Monday morning arrived and I stepped into the private elevator that led to my corporate office. My firm occupied the top 3 floors of a glass skyscraper in the financial district. I walked through the glass doors and the receptionist nodded respectfully. Elena handed me my morning coffee and the preliminary debt acquisition file. I was just reviewing the legal framework to purchase the debt of Vanessa when a loud commotion erupted near the main elevator banks. The heavy glass security doors shuddered. I heard a voice cutting through the hushed professional atmosphere of my firm. It was shrill and completely out of place. I stepped out of my office and walked toward the balcony that overlooked the main reception lobby. Down below, Vanessa and my mother were making an absolute spectacle of themselves. Vanessa was wearing oversized designer sunglasses indoors, clutching a luxury handbag like a shield. My mother was pointing a manicured finger at the security guard, who was calmly asking them to lower their voices. "I need to see your manager immediately," my mother demanded loudly. Her voice echoed off the marble walls, drawing the attention of several junior analysts and visiting clients. "You have an employee here named Chloe. She is an ungrateful, vicious little girl, and we are here to make sure your firm knows exactly what kind of person you are employing." Vanessa chimed in, holding up her phone as if she was recording a live video for her followers. "She is a complete fraud," Vanessa announced to the bewildered reception staff. "She pretends to be a successful finance worker, but she grew up wearing my hand-me-downs. She drove a beaten-up sedan and could barely afford community college. Now she refuses to help her own family during a minor cash flow issue. You need to fire her before she steals from your company." They honestly believed they held the power. They thought this firm was like the retail jobs I worked during college, where a screaming customer could get a cashier fired. They had no idea the security guards were currently waiting for my direct signal to call the police. They did not realize the junior analysts staring at them were my direct subordinates. I stood on the mezzanine level, looking down at the two of them. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling it warm my throat. I turned to Elena, who was standing beside me, with a completely blank expression. "Are those the women from the debt file?" Elena asked, keeping her voice perfectly level. "Yes," I replied. "My mother and my sister. They seem to think they can intimidate my employer into firing me." Elena adjusted her glasses. "Should I call the building security chief, or would you prefer the police?" "Neither," I said. "Let them talk. I want to see exactly how far they are willing to go." Down in the lobby, my mother was escalating her performance. She slammed her hand against the reception desk, causing the receptionist to jump back. "I demand to speak to human resources," my mother yelled. "You need to know your employee, Chloe, is financially abusing her family. She is hiding money and refusing to pay her fair share. If you do not terminate her right now, I am going to call the local news and tell them this firm supports elder abuse." Vanessa nodded vigorously, leaning over the desk to glare at the receptionist. "She is toxic and dangerous. She is socially unfit to work in a corporate environment. I am a prominent lifestyle influencer with thousands of followers. If you do not fire my sister immediately, I will make sure everyone online knows this company is a terrible place." A few senior partners stepped out of their offices, drawn by the shouting match. They looked up at me on the balcony, exchanging amused and confused glances. In the world of corporate liquidations, we dealt with angry executives and hostile takeovers every single day. A screaming mother and a crying influencer were not a threat. They were free entertainment. My mother caught sight of a senior partner walking past the lobby. "You there?" she shouted, waving her arms. "Are you a manager here? You need to listen to me. Your employee Chloe is a massive liability." The senior partner, a ruthless man named David who had mentored me for years, stopped and looked at my mother with pity and severe distaste. He then looked up at the balcony and caught my eye. He raised one eyebrow in a silent question. I gave him a slight nod. David turned back to my mother. "Madam," he said, his voice dripping with icy corporate politeness, "I highly suggest you lower your voice before you embarrass yourself further, because you are standing in a highly secure private financial institution." My mother scoffed loudly. "I am not embarrassed," she fired back. "I am trying to save your business. That girl grew up poor and desperate. She is a nobody who will drag your company entirely down." Vanessa pointed her phone camera directly at David. "Tell us your name so my followers know who is protecting a manipulative liar." David chuckled, a low rumbling sound that echoed in the lobby. "I think you are severely confused about who works for whom," he replied smoothly. "Chloe is not just an employee here. She is our leading acquisition specialist and the top revenue generator for this floor. In fact, she owns a substantial equity stake in this firm. My mother froze. The color drained from her face, processing his precise words. I watched the exact moment my mother realized the narrative she had spent 33 years building was a complete fiction. She looked around the expansive lobby, her eyes darting from the polished marble floors to the sleek security desks, and finally up to the glass balcony where I stood. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply turned and walked toward the floating glass staircase that led down to the main floor. The clicking of my heels echoed through the space. As I descended, the floor shifted its focus. Junior analysts who had been frozen in shock immediately straightened their posture. A vice president passing through the lobby stepped back, giving me a respectful nod. The absolute deference of everyone in the room was undeniable. I was not a lowly employee they could get fired with a tantrum. I was the apex predator in a building full of sharks. Vanessa slowly lowered her phone. The recording light stopped blinking. Her followers would not be seeing this part of the story. "That is impossible," my mother stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me as I reached the bottom step. "You are a clerk. You drive a sensible sedan. You rent a small apartment. You do not own a stake in an investment firm." "I drive a sensible sedan when I visit you to avoid paying for your dinners," I replied. "I live in a penthouse overlooking the lake. I never told you what I do because you never asked. You only ever cared about the brand of Vanessa, which, as I saw on Friday, is currently drowning in a massive ocean of debt." Vanessa flinched. "You lied to us," she accused with genuine outrage. "You hid your money while watching me struggle. You could have funded my marketing campaign with your pocket change, but you let me take predatory loans. You are a monster." "No, Vanessa," I corrected her. "I am a liquidator. I analyze assets and strip away useless parts. I watched you take out loans to buy designer handbags instead of investing in your supply chain. I simply allowed you to dig your own grave without handing you my shovel." My mother puffed up her chest, trying to regain the authority slipping through her fingers. "I am your mother," she commanded, her voice shrill. "Call your bank right now and authorize a transfer to clear her debt, or I will stand in this lobby and tell your colleagues how you treat your flesh and blood." I did not break eye contact. "Elena," I called out without turning my head. My executive assistant Elena materialized instantly. She held a crisp white envelope and extended it toward my mother with an empty corporate smile. "What is this?" my mother demanded, snatching the envelope. "That is a formal cease and desist order," I explained calmly. "It details the legal consequences of corporate harassment, trespassing, and attempting to blackmail a senior equity partner. If you or Vanessa ever step foot inside this building again, or if you attempt to contact my employer to disparage my character, our legal department will bury you in civil suits until you cannot even afford the gas to drive back to the suburbs." "You would not sue your own mother," she whispered, the threat finally piercing through her arrogance. "You threatened to disown me over dinner on Friday," I reminded her. "I am just formalizing the paperwork." Vanessa tried one last tactic. She pushed past our mother, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Chloe, please. Marcus is going to leave me if we lose the business. He put his name on the guarantor forms. We are going to lose everything." "You should have thought about Marcus before you maxed out the business accounts to fly first class to Paris," I said, feeling absolutely zero sympathy for her manufactured tears. I turned to the head of security, a towering man named Jackson, who had been waiting patiently for my signal. "Jackson, these two women are no longer permitted on the premises. Please escort them out. If they resist, call the police and press trespassing charges." "Yes, ma'am," Jackson said. He gestured toward the revolving glass doors. "Ladies, it is time to leave." My mother looked at me, her chest heaving with indignant rage. "You are dead to us, Chloe. Do you hear me? You are completely dead to this family." I did not answer. I simply turned my back and began walking toward the private elevator. I heard the sound of Jackson firmly guiding them toward the exit. I heard the clatter of the designer handbag of Vanessa catching in the turnstile as she was hurried out. I heard the heavy glass doors slide shut, cutting off the last of their frantic shouting. The lobby remained silent for a few seconds. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the quiet hum of the financial firm resumed. Analysts went back to their tablets. Phones began to ring. The machine kept moving. I stepped into the elevator and Elena followed me inside. She pressed the button for the executive floor. That was efficiently handled, Elena noted, looking at her tablet. The legal department has already filed a copy of the warning. Good, I said, watching the floor numbers climb on the digital display. Has the commercial bank responded to our debt acquisition offer? Yes, Elena replied, her fingers flying rapidly across the screen. They accepted the 20% premium. The transfer of the debt portfolio of Vanessa to your holding company will be legally binding by tomorrow morning. However, there is one more thing. I looked at her. What is it? Your private line received a call while you were in the lobby, Elena said, pulling up a secure message log. It was from Marcus. He is asking for a completely confidential meeting with you tonight. He says it is a matter of life and death, and he cannot let Vanessa know he is speaking to you. Set up the meeting at 8 o'clock tonight at the Obsidian Room, I told Elena. Book a private booth in the back. Do not put the reservation under my name. That evening, I sat in the corner booth of the dimly lit lounge swirling a glass of sparkling water. The Obsidian Room was strictly members only, which meant Vanessa and her social climbing friends could never enter. It was perfect. Marcus arrived exactly on time. The confident, stylish marketing director I usually saw was completely gone. The African-American man sliding into the booth looked utterly exhausted. His shoulders were slumped and his eyes were bloodshot. He ordered a neat bourbon from the waiter and swallowed half of it immediately. Thank you for seeing me, Chloe, he said. I did not know who else to call. Vanessa thinks I am working late. I kept my expression neutral. You said it was a matter of life and death, Marcus. My time is incredibly valuable, so I suggest you skip the pleasantries and tell me exactly what is happening. He stared into his glass. I knew sales were down and suppliers were angry, but I did not know the full extent until this morning. Vanessa intercepted the mail for months. She hid the default notices. The bank called me demanding answers today. I already know about the $640,000 debt, I reminded him. I saw the folder on Friday. You co-signed the loans. That is not the worst part, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I saw genuine terror in his eyes. She drained the college fund. My analytical mind paused for a fraction of a second. Elaborate, I commanded. When our daughter was born, my parents gave us $50,000 to start a college trust, he explained, wiping his face. I set up a secure account. I thought it was untouchable, but Vanessa had the login. She convinced me to give her access years ago. I checked the balance this afternoon. It is gone, Chloe. Every single penny. She transferred it out over the past 6 months to pay for inventory she never sold and influencer trips she could not afford. She stole the future of our daughter to buy designer bags and fake internet clout. I leaned back against the leather seat. I always knew my sister was a narcissistic parasite, but stealing from her own child was a new low. And the guarantor signatures, I asked, pressing for the financial mechanics. How did she get you to co-sign for the commercial loans? She brought me a stack of papers months ago, Marcus admitted. She was crying. She said the business was on the verge of a massive breakthrough and she just needed a bridge loan. She told me that if I did not sign it, meant I did not believe in her. She manipulated me, and I was foolish enough to trust her. Now I am legally tied to a sinking ship. If she goes down, I go down. My credit will be destroyed. He looked at me with raw desperation. Chloe, I know you have money. I heard what happened at your office today. Vanessa called me screaming about her humiliation. I am not asking you to pay off the commercial debt. But please, can you give me a personal loan to replace the college fund? I will pay you back every month. I just need to secure the future of my daughter. I looked at the broken man across from me. He was collateral damage in the toxic blast radius of my family. Giving him money now would only mean Vanessa would steal it again. Throwing cash at a leaking hull never works. I am not giving you a single dollar, Marcus, I said flatly. His face crumpled. The last spark of hope extinguished in his eyes. I understand, he whispered, looking down at his empty glass. I had to try. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. However, I am going to give you something much more valuable than a loan. I'm going to give you a way out. He looked up, confusion mixing with his despair. What do you mean? You need to file for divorce, I instructed, my voice sharp and decisive. You need to hire a ruthless family lawyer tomorrow morning. File for sole custody of your daughter. Document the theft of the college fund. Document the hidden default notices. Create a massive legal firewall between your personal assets and the business entities of Vanessa. But the commercial loans, he protested. My name is on those guarantor forms. Let me worry about the commercial loans, I said smoothly. But you must file those divorce papers before Friday. If you are still legally bound to her by the time the weekend begins, the financial fallout will obliterate you. Cut the anchor, Marcus, or you will drown with her. He stared at me, processing the gravity of my words. You are planning something, he realized. I simply smiled, a cold, calculated curve of my lips. Just protect your daughter, Marcus. Leave Vanessa to me. I stood up and walked out of the lounge. The cool night air felt refreshing. When I finally returned to my penthouse, a thick, secure envelope was waiting on my kitchen island. Elena had delivered the finalized debt acquisition portfolio via private courier. I poured myself a glass of red wine and opened the file. The transfer was complete. I was now the sole legal creditor of the brand of Vanessa. I flipped to the collateral section of the banking agreement to see what assets the original bank had secured against the massive business loans. My eyes scanned the legal descriptions. Suddenly I stopped. A genuine laugh escaped my lips, echoing in the quiet penthouse. Vanessa had not just manipulated Marcus into signing the guarantor forms. There was another signature. My parents had secretly put up the deed to their sprawling mansion. They handed me the keys. I smiled. I traced my finger over the signatures of Richard and Patricia at the bottom of the loan agreement. They gambled their suburban mansion, the ultimate symbol of their cultivated social status, on a failing cosmetics company. I stared at the notary stamp confirming the document. My parents leveraged their primary residence to secure a credit line for Vanessa. They risked the roof over their heads so their golden child could continue purchasing fake followers and flying first class. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. I took another sip of wine, letting the magnitude of my discovery settle in. In their attempt to fund the lifestyle of Vanessa, they inadvertently handed me the ultimate weapon. They spent my childhood treating me like a worthless burden. They demanded I liquidate my assets to save them days ago, threatening to disown me if I refused. Now, by purchasing this bad debt, I held the legal right to foreclose on their estate. I was not just the creditor of Vanessa, I was the landlord of my parents. I placed my wine glass down and picked up my phone. It was past 10 at night. I dialed the head of our legal department, an attorney named Sarah. She answered, unfazed by the late hour. Sarah, I need you to pull up the digital files Elena forwarded to the secure server I instructed. Look at the collateral annex for the cosmetics brand acquisition. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. A few seconds passed in silence. Then a low whistle came through the speaker. Well, this is a bloodbath, Sarah noted, her voice dripping with amusement. The primary debtor is severely delinquent, and the secondary guarantors pledged an unencumbered residential property to secure the final tranche of funding. Because the business missed 3 consecutive payments, you have the legal right to call in the $640,000 debt immediately. Are there any loopholes they can exploit? I asked, pacing across the floor. Any grace periods hidden in the fine print? Sarah paused, reviewing the documents. None that will save them. The original bank drafted an airtight commercial guarantee. The parents waived their right to notice of default, meaning the bank did not have to tell them the business was failing before calling the loan. Since you acquired the portfolio, all those rights transferred directly to your holding company. If they cannot produce the full $640,000 upon demand, you can initiate foreclosure proceedings on their mansion. You could have the sheriffs changing their locks in weeks. Prepare the demand letters I ordered. Draft the formal notice of default and the intent to foreclose. I want the documents to be legally flawless and terrifying to read. When do you want them served? Sarah asked. Hold them for now, I replied. I will deliver the news myself. I ended the call and walked back to the island. I stared at the signature of my father on the contract. Richard always prized optics over everything else. I remembered a Thanksgiving dinner when I was 19. I wore a simple dress from a discount store because I was paying my own way through college. He pulled me aside and hissed that I was embarrassing him in front of his business partners. He banished me to the end of the table so I would not ruin the aesthetic of his perfect gathering. Now that same man secretly mortgaged his pride and joy to finance a toxic illusion. The mansion was his crown jewel. It was where my mother hosted her elite charity galas, where she judged her neighbors, and where she proudly declared me a failure. Losing it would make them social pariahs. It would strip away the only thing they valued. I opened my laptop and began drafting a new document. This was not a formal legal notice. This was a personal communication. If I handed this over to the lawyers, my parents would find a way to spin it. They would play the victim card, crying to their country club friends about a predatory bank seizing their assets. I needed them to know exactly who was pulling the strings. I needed them to understand that the daughter they discarded was the architect of their downfall. I typed out the header of the email, addressing it to both my parents and my sister. I kept the language cold, clinical, and devoid of any familial warmth. I outlined the exact amount of the debt, the accrued penalties, and the legal transfer of the portfolio to my holding company. I highlighted the section detailing the collateral agreement, specifically naming the address of their sprawling suburban estate. I reviewed the timeline. It was Tuesday night. Marcus needed time to secure his divorce lawyer and protect his daughter. I promised him a window of opportunity to escape the blast radius. Giving my family a 72-hour deadline would push the detonation to Friday evening. Exactly 1 week after they sat in that Michelin star restaurant and demanded I sacrifice my life for theirs, they would lose everything they held dear. I saved the draft to my outbox. I did not feel angry anymore. The simmering rage that fueled my 20s was completely gone. In its place was a chilling sense of absolute clarity. They had demanded I pay the debt or face being disowned. They thought it was an ultimatum. They did not realize it was a transaction. I closed my laptop and turned off the bright kitchen lights. I had the legal documents secured, the legal team mobilized, and the precise timeline set. The trap was fully constructed, and the bait had already been swallowed without any hesitation. I walked slowly to my bedroom, feeling much lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow morning, I would finally press send. Tomorrow morning, the empire of Vanessa would begin its rapid descent, taking the arrogant, delusional kingdom of my parents completely down with it. I woke up Wednesday morning before the sun broke over Lake Michigan. My alarm chimed at 5. I did not linger in bed. I moved through my morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, black coffee, tailored navy blue suit. I sat at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. The draft was sitting exactly where I left it in my outbox. I read through the text one final time. It was devoid of emotion, stripped of any familial connection. It was a corporate execution order. I moved the cursor over the send button. I thought about the decades of subtle cruelties. The times my mother told me my clothes were an embarrassment. The times my father waved away my academic achievements because Vanessa had managed to secure a minor brand partnership. I thought about the dinner 5 days ago when they demanded I sacrifice my entire financial foundation to save a sister who actively despised me. I clicked send. The email was addressed to Richard, Patricia, and Vanessa. The subject line was simply Notice of Default and Intent to Foreclose. The body of the email read as follows. This communication serves as formal legal notice that Obsidian Holdings has acquired the entirety of the distressed commercial debt previously held by your cosmetics brand. As the sole managing director of Obsidian Holdings, I am now your exclusive creditor. The total outstanding balance, including principal, accrued interest, and late penalties, is exactly $640,000. I continued the email outlining the specific mechanisms of their failure. Due to 3 consecutive missed payments, the loan is officially in default. Under the terms of the original commercial guarantee, which you willingly signed, I am exercising the right to accelerate the debt. The full balance of $640,000 is due immediately. Then came the fatal blow, the paragraph detailing their catastrophic mistake. I specifically referenced the collateral annex. Furthermore, I have reviewed the secondary guarantor agreements signed by Richard and Patricia. You pledged the deed to your primary residence as collateral for this commercial credit line. You waived your right to a cure period. Therefore, you have exactly 72 hours from the timestamp of this email to wire the full balance to the attached escrow account. I closed the email with absolute finality. The deadline is Friday at 9 in the morning. If the funds are not received by that exact minute, Obsidian Holdings will initiate immediate foreclosure proceedings on your estate. We will also file for the immediate seizure and liquidation of all remaining assets belonging to the cosmetics company. There will be no extensions. There will be no negotiations. Do not attempt to contact my personal phone. All further communication must be directed to my legal counsel. I closed my laptop and left for the office. I felt nothing but a sharp, clean focus. I stepped into the elevator and watched the city wake up through the glass walls. By the time I arrived at my firm, Elena was already at her desk. She handed me my schedule for the day, completely unaware that I had just dropped a nuclear bomb on the Chicago suburbs. I knew exactly how the morning would play out in my parents' house. My father checked his emails religiously at 7 every morning while drinking his tea. My mother usually sat across from him browsing social media and checking the follower count of Vanessa. I could picture the exact moment the email arrived in his inbox. He would see my name and assume it was an apology. He would assume I was crawling back begging for their forgiveness after my dramatic exit from the restaurant. He would open it with a smug smile, ready to read my surrender. Instead, he would read his own financial obituary. At 7:14, my phone screen lit up. It was an incoming call from my father. I watched his name flash on the screen. I did not answer. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, my mother called. I let that ring out too. Then came a call from Vanessa. They were panicking. The cognitive dissonance must have been deafening. The daughter they viewed as a pathetic clerk was suddenly speaking to them in the language of corporate asset seizure. I placed my phone face down on my desk and turned my attention to a quarterly earnings report for a legitimate client. I had given them exactly 72 hours. The clock was officially ticking, and I was not going to waste a single second of my day entertaining their hysteria. At 8:30, my secure email server notified me that the message had been opened and read 12 separate times. They were passing the phone around. They were probably printing it out, staring at the corporate letterhead of Obsidian Holdings, trying to find a loophole. They would call their country club lawyer, some overpriced attorney who handled their golf course disputes, and demand he fix it. I knew exactly what that lawyer would tell them. He would look at the airtight commercial guarantee they had blindly signed. He would look at the unencumbered deed they had foolishly pledged. He would tell them that the debt acquisition was perfectly legal and that I held all the cards. But they would not believe him. People like my parents, people who have spent their entire lives shielded by a fragile bubble of suburban entitlement, simply cannot process absolute defeat. Their arrogance was a terminal disease. They would convince themselves it was a bluff. They would tell themselves that I was just an angry, jealous sister trying to scare them. They would rationalize that blood was thicker than legal contracts and that I would never actually pull the trigger and seize their precious mansion. They would choose to double down on their delusions rather than face the terrifying reality of their situation. I instructed Elena to ensure the asset seizure teams were on standby. I wanted the bailiffs scheduled. I wanted the tow trucks lined up for the luxury cars of Vanessa. I wanted the foreclosure notices printed on heavy, terrifying legal stock. I checked my watch. 71 hours remained. I pulled up the internal tracking system for the holding company. I wanted everything staged and ready. When Friday morning arrived, the execution needed to be flawless. I was not just going to take their house. I was going to evict their entire false reality. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing merger portfolios for our European clients. My phone remained silent. They had transitioned from panic to indignant rage. At exactly 10:15, an email arrived in my secure inbox. It was from my father. I opened it expecting insults, but what I read made me shake my head in absolute disbelief. Richard had not consulted a real lawyer. He consulted his colossal ego. Chloe, the email began completely ignoring the legal formatting of my notice. Your mother and I had a good laugh at your prank today. I do not know what fake internet templates you used to draft this nonsense, but you are completely out of your depth. You do not own anything. You are just a bitter girl trying to scare us because you are jealous. Since you want to play legal games, I have spoken to my country club associates, he continued. If you do not wire the $640,000 to your sister by tomorrow morning, I am personally suing you for parental support. We housed you, fed you, and tolerated you for 18 years. You owe us compensation for raising you. Consider this your final warning. Drop this embarrassing charade immediately, or I will destroy what little career you have left. I forwarded the email to Sarah in our legal department with a single question mark. She replied 2 minutes later stating parental support laws in Illinois do not apply to wealthy suburbanites trying to extort their successful children to fund a failed cosmetics brand. It was legally laughable. It was a pathetic bluff built on a foundation of absolute ignorance. My father honestly believed he could intimidate an equity partner of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm with a baseless threat he overheard at the 9th hole of his golf course. He was attempting to bully a corporate liquidator using the exact same tactics he used to bully me when I was a helpless teenager. Meanwhile, my mother actively took her campaign back to the family group chat. I had muted the notifications, but I kept the window open on my secondary monitor to observe their psychological unraveling. Patricia was working overtime to control the narrative. She assured my aunts and uncles that my email was a pathetic cry for attention. She claimed I was having a mental breakdown because I was envious of the beautiful marriage and thriving business of Vanessa. She told everyone to simply ignore my outbursts until I came to my senses and apologized to the family. My Aunt Susan quickly replied with praying hands emojis, praising my mother for her endless patience and grace. They were all wrapping themselves tightly in a thick, cozy blanket of complete denial. But Vanessa delivered the crowning jewel of their blind arrogance. Just before noon, Elena knocked on my office door. She walked slowly in, holding her tablet with a strained expression. You asked me to monitor the social media accounts of the failing primary debtor, Elena said, handing me the device. She just went live 10 minutes ago. I tapped the screen to play the video. There was my sister sitting in her pristine living room, bathed in the glow of an expensive ring light. She looked so perfectly styled and completely unbothered by the fact that her business was hours away from total liquidation. Hi guys, Vanessa cooed into the camera, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I know there have been some crazy rumors floating around today from toxic people trying to bring my brand down. But I wanted to pop on here and remind you to always block out the haters. When people try to tell you that you are failing, the best revenge is living fabulously. She reached down and hoisted a massive bright orange shopping bag onto her lap. The logo of a high-end French design house was stamped boldly across the front. To celebrate breaking sales records this quarter, I decided to treat myself today, Vanessa announced, pulling a pristine new leather handbag from its dust cover. It was a limited edition piece that retailed for no less than $20,000. She paraded it in front of the camera, admiring the gold hardware. Stay focused on your goals, everyone, she told her viewers. Do not let jealous people dim your light. I handed the tablet back to Elena. The sheer stupidity was staggering. Vanessa was actively committing financial suicide on a public broadcast. She was bleeding out from a mortal financial wound, and her solution was to buy an overpriced bandage just to spite me. Did she literally purchase that today? I asked, my voice perfectly calm. Elena nodded, checking the timestamp and location tags from the video feed. Our financial tracking software shows a new massive charge on her secondary business credit line. She maxed out the last remaining card to buy that bag this very morning. Yes, log it, I instructed without hesitation. Add that specific handbag to the asset seizure manifest for Friday morning. When the bailiffs arrive at her house, I want them to take that bag straight out of her hands. It belongs to Obsidian Holdings now. She bought it with our money. I turned my chair to face the window, watching the dark clouds roll over the Chicago skyline. My family had officially chosen their path. They had received a legal execution order and decided to laugh in the face of the executioner. They thought their suburban privilege made them invincible. They believed that because they had spent decades treating me like dirt, I would eventually fold and back down. They did not realize that the corporate machinery I commanded had no feelings. It had no conscience. It only recognized contracts, defaults, and liquidations. I checked the digital clock on my desk. Exactly 67 hours remained until the deadline. The trap was now fully set, and the relentless countdown moved to absolute zero without any mercy for them all. I reviewed the signed purchase agreements. My private holding company, Obsidian Holdings, was now the sole proprietor of Vanessa's catastrophic debt. I had acquired the entire portfolio for less than 50 cents on the dollar. The commercial bank was thrilled to offload the toxic asset, completely unaware of the familial connection. The suppliers, desperate for any liquidity, had eagerly signed away their rights. I held all the paper. The trap was armed and fully loaded. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. My mother was still posting her pathetic missives claiming my email was an elaborate bluff. "Do not worry, everyone," her latest message read. "Richard's lawyer friend said it is just an empty threat. Chloe is just acting out because she is jealous of Vanessa. We are ignoring her tantrum." I tapped the text field. I typed carefully, ensuring my message was devoid of any emotion. Tick-tock, 48 hours. I hit send. The response was immediate. The read receipts indicated that Richard, Patricia, and Vanessa had all seen the message within seconds. A barrage of incoming calls began. My father, then my mother, then Vanessa. I ignored them all, silencing the device and slipping it into my desk drawer. They were running out of time, and the reality of their situation was finally starting to pierce their thick armor of denial. They were realizing that this was not a tantrum. This was an execution. My office line rang. It was Sarah from the legal department. "The title search is complete on the residential property," she reported. "It is completely unencumbered, exactly as you suspected. The commercial guarantee is ironclad. We are ready to proceed with the asset seizure and foreclosure notices the moment the deadline expires." "Excellent," I replied. "Ensure the local sheriff's department is notified and ready to execute the seizure at Vanessa's storefront precisely at 9 a.m. on Friday. I want the bailiffs at my parents' estate at the same time, coordinated and simultaneous. No delays." I spent the remainder of the afternoon managing legitimate acquisitions, my mind sharply focused. I felt a strange sense of detachment regarding my family. They had demanded I sacrifice my financial stability to save Vanessa, threatening to disown me if I refused. They believed their conditional love was a powerful weapon. They did not understand that to me their affection was a worthless currency. I had built my empire without their support, and I would dismantle their false reality without a shred of remorse. As the evening approached, I received a secure message from Marcus. "I filed the papers this afternoon," he wrote. "I have temporary custody, and we are staying at an undisclosed location. My lawyer secured a preliminary injunction separating my personal assets from the business entities. Thank you." I smiled. Marcus had successfully severed his ties to the sinking ship. He and his daughter would survive the impending blast. Vanessa, however, was now completely isolated, tethered only to the massive anchor of her own debt and the blind arrogance of our parents. I left the office and walked to my car, the crisp Chicago air sharp against my skin. The city felt vibrant, a landscape of opportunity and ruthless consequence. I drove back to my penthouse, the silence of my home a welcome contrast to the chaotic noise of my family's panic. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights reflect off the dark waters of Lake Michigan. My phone remained silent in my purse. I had blocked their numbers, effectively severing their ability to reach me directly. They were forced to sit in their suburban mansion watching the clock tick down, their anxiety mounting with every passing hour. They were realizing that their wealth, their status, their carefully cultivated image, it was all a fragile facade, vulnerable to the very daughter they had consistently underestimated. The 48-hour mark approached. I felt a profound sense of calm. The machinery I had set in motion was unstoppable. The debt was mine. The leverage was absolute. My parents had played a dangerous game betting their home against my submission. They had lost, and the collection of that debt was going to be spectacular. I opened my laptop and reviewed the final execution plan: the asset seizure at Vanessa's boutique, the foreclosure notice delivery at my parents' estate, the swift and public dismantling of their perceived superiority. It was all scheduled and confirmed. The dominoes were lined up waiting for the final push. I closed the laptop and finished my wine. Tomorrow would bring the final 24 hours of their ignorance. Friday would bring the consequences. They had demanded my surrender. I was preparing their eviction. Thursday morning arrived with a biting chill that swept off the lake. It was precisely 48 hours since I had sent the ultimatum. At 8 o'clock sharp, Elena walked into my office and placed a single printed sheet of paper on my desk. The freeze was officially active. Obsidian Holdings now possessed the legal authority to place an administrative hold on every financial artery connected to the cosmetics brand of Vanessa. I froze the merchant processing terminals, the vendor credit lines, and the secondary corporate cards she used for her daily personal expenses. The financial guillotine had dropped, and Vanessa was completely oblivious. Through the live transaction logs populating on my secondary monitor, I watched her morning routine halt. At 8:45, Vanessa attempted to purchase her usual overpriced matcha latte at an upscale cafe in her affluent suburban neighborhood. The transaction was instantly denied. I could picture the scene perfectly. She would have laughed it off, blaming a glitch in the banking app. She would have flashed her perfect influencer smile at the barista and casually pulled out her secondary platinum business card. That transaction hit our servers at 8:46. Denied. Code 42. Account frozen by primary creditor. The log showed a rapid succession of frantic attempts over the next 10 minutes. She tried her third card, then her fourth. Every piece of plastic in her designer wallet was useless. The financial tracking software on my screen lit up with red rejection flags like fireworks. Denied. 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 By 9 o'clock, the reality of her situation must have finally pierced through her thick bubble of denial. She could not even buy a cup of coffee. The lifestyle brand, CEO, was standing in a crowded cafe, unable to scrounge up the funds for a morning beverage, while her wealthy neighbors undoubtedly watched the humiliating spectacle unfold. My office phone rang. It was the liaison from the commercial bank we had purchased the debt from. He sounded highly amused. He reported Vanessa was screaming at one of their representatives over the phone. She was demanding they unfreeze her accounts immediately, citing her status as a prominent social media influencer, and threatening to destroy the reputation of the bank online. The representative simply read from the standard legal script we had provided. They informed her that the bank no longer held her accounts. They explained her debt portfolio had been legally acquired by Obsidian Holdings, and all of her financial assets were under a strict administrative freeze. The name Obsidian Holdings would not mean anything to her at first. She would assume it was just another faceless corporate entity, a predatory collection agency trying to squeeze her for late fees. But then she would remember the header of the email I had sent her 36 hours ago. The pieces would click together in her head. The sister she had mocked for years, the woman she had demanded sell her modest apartment to pay her debts, was the CEO of the company, currently choking the financial life out of her. Elena brought me my morning espresso and pointed to her tablet. You should see her latest social media posts. Elena noted, her voice dripping with dry sarcasm. The cracks are starting to show. I tapped the screen. Vanessa had just uploaded a new video to her story. She was sitting in the driver's seat of her luxury SUV, but the perfect angles were gone. Her hands were visibly shaking. Her voice possessed a frantic, breathless quality that no amount of digital filtering could hide. She rambled about dealing with toxic corporate sabotage and how jealous people were trying to steal her brand. She begged her followers to buy her cosmetics immediately to show support against corporate bullying. It was a pathetic display of desperate begging disguised as female empowerment. The irony was incredibly rich. She was urging her followers to buy products through a website whose merchant processing system I had already disabled. Every customer who attempted a purchase that morning received a generic error message stating the store was temporarily unable to accept payments. Her revenue stream was entirely severed. She was standing in the middle of a desert screaming for water while I held the only map to the oasis. The internal log showed the escalating panic. At 10:15, she attempted to log into her payroll processing software. Access denied. At 10:30, she tried to wire funds to her packaging supplier. Transfer blocked. At 11 o'clock, she attempted to access the remaining balance of the college fund she had already decimated, trying to scrape together whatever loose change was left to hire a lawyer. Insufficient funds. The walls were closing in rapidly. The glamorous life she had projected to millions of strangers on the internet was dissolving into digital dust. She had no liquidity. She had absolutely no way to pay the $640,000 she owed before the deadline expired tomorrow morning. She was completely stripped of her financial armor. The panic would soon turn into sheer terror. She would frantically search for someone to blame for her catastrophic failure. She would look for a victim to absorb the impact of the explosion. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair and watched the red denial alerts continue to populate on my monitor. She was trapped in a cage of her own making, and the oxygen was quickly running out. I knew exactly what her next move would be. When a narcissist loses control, they immediately turn their rage toward the closest target. She would not call me. She was too proud to face the executioner directly. She would look for the person she deemed the weakest link in her immediate vicinity. She would call her husband. She would demand that Marcus fix the unfixable mess she had created. But I had already spoken to Marcus 2 nights ago. I had already given him the absolute blueprint for his escape. Vanessa stormed through the heavy oak front doors of her suburban mansion. She did not bother to take off her designer shoes, leaving muddy footprints across the pristine white marble foyer. Her phone was gripped tightly in her manicured hand, still flashing red with denial alerts from her banking apps. She had spent the last 2 hours sitting in her luxury vehicle screaming at various customer service representatives before finally realizing the futility of her efforts. The administrative freeze was impenetrable. She needed a scapegoat, and she needed one immediately. Marcus, she shrieked, her voice tearing through the quiet elegance of the house. Marcus, get down here right now. She marched up the sweeping grand staircase, expecting her husband to come rushing down, offering a miraculous solution to fix the mess she orchestrated. She pushed open the double doors to their massive master suite, ready to unleash verbal abuse. The words died in her throat. The scene inside the bedroom completely short-circuited her furious momentum. Marcus was not cowering. He was not frantically dialing the bank. He was standing calmly beside the custom walk-in closet, methodically folding his clothes and placing them into a large black suitcase. 2 smaller bags belonging to their daughter were already zipped shut and sitting neatly by the bedroom door. He continued folding a dark sweater with steady, deliberate movements. "What are you doing?" Vanessa demanded. "My accounts are frozen. We are under corporate attack from my psycho sister, and you are packing a bag. Put that away and call the bank, Marcus. Tell them you are the marketing director, and demand they release the operating funds right now." Marcus closed the suitcase and zipped it shut. He turned to face her, and Vanessa took a step back. His posture was rigid, and his eyes were completely devoid of their usual warmth. "I am not calling the bank," Marcus said, his voice deep and remarkably steady. "I am not calling the suppliers. I am not fixing your public relations disaster. I am packing my bags and I am taking our daughter. We are leaving, Vanessa." Vanessa let out a sharp, breathless laugh, masking her rising panic with forced arrogance. "You are leaving? Are you insane, Marcus? You cannot leave me right now. My brand is under a coordinated attack. Chloe bought my debt to humiliate me. You signed those guarantor forms. If I go down, you go down with me. You have to stay and fight this. You owe me your loyalty." Marcus walked over to his bedside table. He picked up a thick manila envelope and held it out toward her. "I am not going down with you, Vanessa. I secured a preliminary injunction separating my personal assets from your fraudulent business entities yesterday afternoon. My lawyers moved very fast. You see, I finally stopped believing your lies about the business being on the verge of a breakthrough. I decided to look at the actual numbers. Vanessa stared at the envelope but refused to take it. What is that? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It is the end of my participation in your delusions, Marcus replied, dropping the envelope onto the pristine white duvet cover. Those are divorce papers. They include an emergency petition for sole custody of our daughter. You cannot do this, Vanessa screamed, her face contorting with sudden violent rage. You cannot take my daughter. I am a prominent public figure. I am her mother. I will destroy you in court, Marcus. I will tell the judge you abandoned me during a financial crisis. I will ruin your entire reputation. Marcus did not raise his voice. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it slowly and held it up so she could see the stark black text. It was a printed bank statement. You will tell the judge a lot of things, Marcus said, his tone turning ice cold. But first you will have to explain this. You will have to explain how the $50,000 college fund my parents started for our daughter was systematically drained over the last 6 months. You will have to explain to a judge why you stole the future of your own child to buy fake engagement metrics and designer handbags you did not need. The remaining color drained entirely from the face of Vanessa. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The absolute reality of her actions was staring her right in the face. She could not gaslight him. She could not spin this narrative. She was caught. You are sick, Vanessa. Marcus continued, stepping closer to her. You mortgaged the life of our child to feed your vanity. You manipulated me into signing away my financial security because you cared more about maintaining a fake aesthetic on the internet than you cared about your own family. Chloe did not destroy you. You destroyed yourself. Chloe is just holding the mirror up so everyone can finally see the ugly truth. Please, Marcus, Vanessa sobbed, dropping to her knees on the plush carpet. This time the tears were absolutely real. They were tears of pure, unadulterated terror. Please do not leave me alone. Chloe is going to take everything. Mom and Dad cannot help me. I have nothing left. I will change. I promise I will change. Just help me fix this, please. I cannot fix you, Vanessa, he said softly, and I am done trying to save you from yourself. He grabbed his suitcase and walked past Vanessa without a second glance, leaving her sobbing hysterically on the floor. He walked down the grand staircase and out the heavy front doors. The heavy thud of the door closing echoed through the sprawling empty mansion. Vanessa was now entirely alone. Her phone buzzed in her pocket with another automated alert from the bank. The 72-hour countdown marched rapidly toward zero. The execution proceeded exactly as I planned. Thursday afternoon arrived with a deceptive calm over the affluent suburban neighborhood of my parents. Patricia was hosting her weekly high society luncheon in the solarium. She sat perfectly poised on a velvet armchair, pouring expensive herbal tea into porcelain cups. She was busy assuring her wealthy neighbors that the recent internet rumors about the cosmetics brand of Vanessa were nothing but a temporary restructuring phase. She smiled her practiced smile, projecting the absolute image of a carefree matriarch. She had completely convinced herself that my email was a meaningless tantrum. At precisely 1 o'clock, a sleek black town car pulled into their circular driveway. A process server stepped out wearing a sharp suit and carrying a thick stack of documents printed on heavy legal stock. He did not ring the bell. He pounded heavily on the custom mahogany front doors. The heavy thud echoed through the mansion, disrupting the polite chatter in the solarium. Richard, annoyed by the interruption, excused himself from his home office to answer the door. He expected a delivery of fine wine or perhaps a package for Vanessa. Instead, the process server handed him a thick sealed envelope, required a signature, and walked away without a single word. Richard carried the envelope back to his private study. He poured himself a glass of expensive scotch and sliced open the seal with a silver letter opener. He pulled out the documents. The header featured the stark black logo of Obsidian Holdings. His eyes scanned the bold red text at the top of the first page, formal notice of pre-foreclosure and intent to seize assets. Richard blinked, taking another sip of his scotch. He read the first paragraph. The legal jargon was dense, but the underlying message was terrifyingly clear. The commercial debt held by his youngest daughter had been fully accelerated due to multiple defaults. He flipped to the second page. His breath hitched in his throat. There was a high-resolution photocopy of the commercial guarantee he and Patricia had signed 18 months ago. Right below their signatures was the unencumbered deed to their sprawling estate. The document stated that because the principal debtor had failed to satisfy the balance, Obsidian Holdings was legally executing its right to claim the collateral. Patricia Richard yelled, his voice cracking with sudden raw panic. "Patricia, get in here right now!" My mother excused herself from her luncheon guests, masking her annoyance with a tight smile. She hurried down the long hallway and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the study. Richard was gripping the edge of his mahogany desk. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and suddenly very old. "What is it?" Patricia demanded, crossing her arms. "You are yelling loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear." Richard shoved the documents across the desk. "Look at this," he whispered hoarsely. "Look at what your ungrateful daughter actually did." Patricia picked up the papers. Her eyes darted rapidly across the legal text. She saw the total amount due. She saw the address of their beloved mansion listed as seized collateral. The paper fluttered in her trembling hands. "This is a fake," she declared, her voice pitching high with denial. "I told you she printed this off the internet. Chloe does not have the money to buy a bank loan. She works in a cubicle." Richard slammed his fist against the desk. "Read the signature block, Patricia. That is the name of our estate. She bought the debt. She owns the paper. I just called the original commercial bank to verify, and they told me the account was transferred on Tuesday. It is real. She is actually going to take our house." Patricia stumbled backward, collapsing into a leather guest chair. "Call William," she demanded, her voice escalating into a frantic shriek. "Call your lawyer from the country club. Tell him to file an injunction. Tell him to sue her for extortion. We are not losing this house over a cosmetics company." Richard grabbed his phone and dialed the number of his expensive attorney with shaking fingers. He put the call on speakerphone so Patricia could hear. William answered smoothly, but his tone shifted dramatically as Richard frantically explained the contents of the pre-foreclosure notice. "Send me a picture of the commercial guarantee you signed," William instructed, his voice tight. Richard snapped a photo and texted it immediately. The study was suffocatingly quiet for 2 agonizing minutes. Finally, William sighed heavily through the speaker. "Richard, I cannot help you," William said, his tone devoid of any usual friendly warmth. "You signed an absolute commercial guarantee and waived your right to a cure period. By pledging your primary residence as collateral on a high-risk business loan, you handed the bank the keys to your front door. Whoever runs Obsidian Holdings executed a flawless debt acquisition. They own your house. If you do not wire $640,000 by tomorrow morning, the sheriffs will legally lock you out." "You are a lawyer!" Richard screamed, gripping the phone. "Find a loophole. Delay the proceedings. She is my daughter. She cannot legally evict her own parents." "The law does not care about your family tree," Richard William replied coldly. "The law only cares about the ink on the contract. You bet your house on a failing business, and you lost. I suggest you start packing." The line went dead. The reality of their catastrophic failure finally crashed down on them. The mansion they used to project their superiority, the estate where they proudly belittled me for 33 years, was officially slipping through their fingers. The sheer terror of public humiliation seized them. Where would they go? How would they explain this to their wealthy friends in the solarium? They were about to become penniless social pariahs. Patricia grabbed her phone with trembling hands. She dialed my number frantically. She expected it to ring. She expected me to answer and submit. The call went straight to a cold automated voicemail. I had blocked their numbers hours ago. She dialed again and again, her manicured thumb jabbing the screen until the glass nearly cracked. Nothing. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. I was completely inaccessible. The dutiful daughter they had conditioned to answer on the first ring was gone. Richard grabbed the keys to his Mercedes. "If we cannot reach Chloe, we are going to the source," he snarled, his face purple with rage. "Vanessa needs to fix the mess she created. Get in the car, Patricia. We are going to her house right now." The drive to the upscale subdivision of Vanessa took less than 20 minutes, but for Richard and Patricia it must have felt like a miserable death march. They sped through red lights, abandoning all pretense of suburban decorum. They pulled into the driveway and saw the heavy oak front door standing wide open. Marcus had left it ajar when he walked out with his suitcases. Richard and Patricia stormed into the foyer. They did not bother to wipe their shoes, tracking dirt across the polished hardwood floors. They found their golden child sitting in the middle of the master bedroom floor. Vanessa was surrounded by scattered designer clothes and empty shoeboxes. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks in dark, jagged streaks. She looked up at her parents, but there was no comfort in her eyes. There was only the feral desperation of a trapped animal realizing the cage was permanently locked. "Get up!" Richard roared, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Chloe bought your debt. She is foreclosing on our estate. We are going to be homeless by tomorrow morning because you could not manage a simple cosmetics company. Call your sister and beg for mercy. Tell her you will pay her back every single penny." Vanessa let out a sharp, hysterical laugh that echoed off the high ceiling. "Call her! I cannot even buy a cup of coffee. My accounts are entirely frozen. Marcus took my daughter and served me with divorce papers an hour ago. He left me. I have absolutely nothing left to give her." Patricia gasped, clutching her pearl necklace. "Marcus left you. How could you let your marriage fall apart at a time like this? We need his income to satisfy the bank. You need to call him back and apologize immediately before he ruins our financial strategy." "Apologize!" Vanessa screamed, scrambling to her feet. She grabbed a crystal perfume bottle from her vanity and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces, raining glass over the plush carpet. "I stole the college fund of my own daughter to keep this fake brand afloat. He is never coming back. I am ruined. And it is entirely your fault." "My fault," Patricia gasped, stepping back in genuine shock. "We gave you everything. We mortgaged our home to save your dream. We treated you like an absolute queen." "You treated me like a prop," Vanessa fired back, stepping aggressively toward our mother. "You did not want a daughter. You wanted a show pony. You spent my entire life telling me that my only value was my appearance. You taught me that if I did not look rich and successful, the neighbors would laugh at us. You forced me to buy designer clothes and throw lavish parties so you could brag to your pathetic bridge club. You built this monster." Richard stepped between them, his fists clenched tight. "Do not speak to your mother that way. We supported you while Chloe gave us nothing but embarrassment. Chloe is the only one who actually works." Vanessa laughed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "You told me business was easy. You told me I just needed to smile and post photos and the money would roll in. You never taught me how to read a financial statement. You never taught me how to manage a supply chain. You just handed me credit cards and told me to look pretty. When the business started failing, you told me to fake it until I made it. Well, I faked it. And now we are all going to pay the price." Patricia burst into tears, sinking onto the edge of the unmade bed. "We are going to lose the house," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Where will we go? The country club will revoke our membership. My friends will block my number. We will be the laughingstock of Chicago. You care more about your country club than the fact that my life is over." Vanessa sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You deserve to lose the house. You deserve to be homeless. You are obsessed with an image you cannot even afford. You pushed me to take out those toxic commercial loans. You told me a true heir never scales back. You told me to ignore the warning signs because successful people manifest their wealth. You are delusional, and you dragged me down with you into the dirt." Richard grabbed Vanessa by the shoulders and shook her hard. "Stop it. We are not losing everything because of an aesthetic. We are losing everything because you are a complete failure. Chloe was right. You are a parasite." Vanessa shoved him away, her eyes wild with unbridled fury. "Do not you dare compare me to Chloe. You hated her because she did not care about your stupid social climbing. You hated her because she saw right through you, and now she holds the deed to your house. She owns you. The daughter you treated like garbage is going to throw you out on the street, and I hope she does." The perfect family dynamic was entirely dead. The facade of suburban royalty had collapsed into a chaotic screaming match of blame and vicious insults. They were completely destroyed. The sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, casting long, jagged shadows across my penthouse. It was Thursday evening. The final 24 hours had officially begun. I poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and settled into the plush velvet sofa in my living room. I placed my personal cell phone on the glass coffee table face up. I wanted a front row seat to the desperation. I wanted to watch them realize that their power over me was entirely extinguished. At 6:15, the screen lit up. Dad. The phone vibrated against the glass, a low, persistent hum. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the rich flavor settle on my tongue. I watched the call go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Dad, then Mom, then Dad again. The rhythm of their panic was erratic and entirely predictable. They were pacing their respective floors, realizing the commercial banks were closed, realizing their country club lawyers were useless, realizing that tomorrow morning they would lose everything. By 7 o'clock, I had 30 missed calls. They were no longer leaving voicemails. They were just dialing in a frantic loop, hoping to break through my silence. The sheer volume of attempts was pathetic. For 33 years, they had ignored my calls, brushed off my achievements, and treated my existence as a mild inconvenience. Now they were treating my phone line like a life raft. I did not feel a shred of pity. Every missed call was a receipt for the years of emotional neglect they had inflicted upon me. I opened my laptop and checked the secure server logs for Obsidian Holdings. Elena had uploaded the final confirmation documents. The asset seizure teams were fully briefed and staged. The local sheriff's department had processed the commercial eviction notices for the storefront of Vanessa. The foreclosure agents were scheduled to arrive at the estate of my parents precisely at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. There were no legal hurdles left to clear. The execution was flawless. At 8:30, a new name popped up on my screen. Aunt Susan. My mother had clearly mobilized the extended family. She was deploying her flying monkeys, hoping that familial pressure would force me to answer. I watched Aunt Susan call twice before my phone lit up with a text message from her. Chloe, please pick up. Your mother is having a nervous breakdown. You cannot do this to your family. It is cruel and unnatural. Call them immediately and fix this. I did not respond. I simply blocked her number. Then I blocked the numbers of my uncle cousin and every other distant relative who attempted to breach my peace. They had all sat at that anniversary dinner completely complicit in my humiliation. They had all watched my mother demand I sacrifice my financial future to save the golden child, and not a single one of them had spoken up in my defense. They were all accessories to the toxicity, and I was revoking their access to my life permanently. The calls continued through the night. I watched the notification counter climb steadily. 50 calls, 65 calls, 80 calls. It was a digital manifestation of their absolute terror. They were staring down the barrel of social and financial ruin. They were realizing that their entire identity was tied to a house they no longer owned and a lifestyle they could no longer afford. They were experiencing the exact same helplessness they had forced upon me when I was a struggling college student begging for basic support. At 11 o'clock, my phone screen lit up with a FaceTime request. It was Vanessa. I debated ignoring it, but the opportunity to see her panic was too tempting. I accepted the call but kept my camera off, ensuring she could only see a black screen while I could see her clearly. Vanessa appeared on the screen looking entirely unhinged. She was sitting in the dark, her face illuminated only by the glow of her phone. Her designer makeup was completely gone, revealing the exhausted, terrified woman underneath. Chloe, she sobbed, her voice cracking. Please tell me you are there. Please say something. I remained completely silent. I took another sip of my wine, watching her squirm. Chloe, I know you can hear me, she pleaded, clutching the phone closer to her face. Marcus actually left. He took the baby and he left me. He filed for divorce. I have no money. I have no credit cards. The suppliers are threatening to sue me personally. You have to stop this. You cannot take my store tomorrow. It is all I have left. You are destroying my life. I stared at her tear-streaked face, feeling absolutely nothing. I thought about the time she ruined my high school graduation by throwing a tantrum because my parents bought me a modest dress instead of the expensive one she wanted. I thought about the time she mocked my entry-level job in finance, calling me a corporate drone. I thought about the fact that she stole the college fund of her own daughter to buy fake engagement metrics. I ended the call without saying a single word. The screen went black. I placed the phone back on the coffee table. The silence in my penthouse felt profound and absolute. The desperation of Vanessa did not move me. Her tears did not soften my resolve. She had built her entire existence on deception and entitlement, and she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. I was not destroying her life. I was simply holding up a mirror and forcing her to look at the wreckage she had created. I finished my wine and stood up, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights of Chicago sparkled below a grid of power and consequence. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the love of a family that was fundamentally incapable of giving it. I had twisted myself into knots trying to prove my worth to people who actively despised my independence. That era of my life was officially over. Tomorrow morning, the sun would rise and the false empire of my family would be completely liquidated. The 98 missed calls on my phone were just the prelude to the main event. I turned off the lights and went to sleep feeling more rested and secure than I had in 3 decades. The final 24 hours were almost over, and I was ready for the dawn. Friday morning broke with a sharp, blinding light that reflected perfectly off the glass skyscrapers of Chicago. I arrived at my office at exactly 8 in the morning. My desk was immaculately clean. Elena stood beside me holding a tablet that displayed a live secure video feed. Our asset recovery team was positioned in an unmarked black van parked directly across the street from the flagship boutique of Vanessa. The high-end shopping district was just beginning to wake up, but my sister was already inside her store. She was desperately trying to save her shattered image. Elena tapped the screen to split the view. On the left side, we had the secure feed from our private security contractors. On the right side, we had the public Instagram live stream of Vanessa. She was standing in front of a wall of unsold inventory, wearing a bright pink tailored suit, and holding the $20,000 designer handbag she had purchased the day before yesterday. She was frantically pitching a massive clearance sale to her remaining followers. "We are doing a surprise flash sale today, guys," Vanessa chirped into her ring light, her voice tight and completely breathless. "Everything in the store is 50% off. I just wanted to give back to my amazing community because we are pivoting to a new aesthetic next month. You have to come down to the boutique right now. The registers are currently down due to a system upgrade, so we are only accepting cash or direct wire transfers this morning." I let out a harsh laugh. She was blatantly attempting to bypass the administrative freeze on her merchant accounts by soliciting untraceable cash. It was a pathetic, desperate maneuver that bordered on criminal fraud, given that her inventory was legally collateralized to Obsidian Holdings. She was trying to sell my property to cover her tracks. I checked the digital clock on my desk. 8:59. "Give the order," I instructed Elena. "Execute the seizure." Elena pressed a button on her earpiece communicating directly with the recovery agents. "Proceed." On the left side of the tablet screen, I watched the doors of the black van slide open. 4 men in dark suits stepped out accompanied by 2 uniformed county sheriffs and a professional locksmith. They marched across the pristine sidewalk with absolute purpose. On the right side of the screen, Vanessa was still rambling to her followers about her fake rebranding strategy. The heavy glass doors of the boutique swung open. The chime echoed through the live stream. Vanessa turned toward the entrance, her flawless influencer smile firmly plastered on her face. "Welcome to the boutique," she greeted them, holding her phone up to capture the new arrivals. "We are doing a cash-only flash sale today." The lead recovery agent, a massive man named Barrett, stepped directly into the frame. He did not smile. He held up a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy stock paper. "Vanessa Anderson Barrett," announced his voice booming through the boutique and echoing across the live broadcast. We are representatives of Obsidian Holdings acting in conjunction with the County Sheriff's Department. You are in default of a $640,000 commercial loan. We are here to execute an immediate asset seizure and secure the premises. The livestream chat went completely berserk. Hundreds of comments flooded the screen in a rapid blur of shock and confusion. Vanessa froze. Her eyes darted from the legal documents to the uniformed officers standing behind Barrett. The color drained entirely from her face, leaving her designer foundation looking like a grotesque mask. "You cannot do this!" she shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical register. "This is private property. Get out of my store right now, or I am calling the police." "The police are already here," Ma'am Barrett replied, gesturing to the sheriffs. "The 72-hour cure period expired exactly 2 minutes ago. You no longer possess the legal right to occupy this commercial space. We require you to step away from the merchandise immediately." Vanessa backed away, clutching the bright orange designer shopping bag to her chest like a shield. She had forgotten she was still broadcasting live to thousands of people. Her absolute humiliation was being consumed in real time. "You are ruining my launch," she screamed, stamping her foot in a petulant, childish rage. "My sister is behind this. She is a jealous, psychotic monster. You tell Chloe she is not getting a single thing from me." Barrett remained entirely unfazed by her tantrum. He looked down at the asset manifest clipped to his clipboard. "Actually, Mom, my specific instructions from the primary creditor state that we are to seize all collateral purchased with company funds. That includes the limited edition handbag currently in your possession." "No." Vanessa gasped, clutching the bag tighter. "I bought this with my own money. It is mine." "Our financial forensics indicate you utilized the secondary business credit line to purchase that item on Wednesday morning," Barrett stated, moving one step closer. "Hand it over voluntarily, or the sheriffs will compel you to surrender the stolen collateral." Vanessa looked at the stern faces of the law enforcement officers. She looked down at her phone, realizing the entire internet was watching her get stripped of her fake wealth. With shaking hands, she slowly lowered the bag and pushed it across the glass display counter. Barrett took it immediately, handing it to a subordinate to be cataloged and boxed. Outside the boutique, the situation escalated further. A heavy-duty tow truck pulled up to the curb. The flashing yellow lights reflected off the store windows. The operator hopped out and began securing chains to the front axle of the pristine white luxury vehicle of Vanessa. She had leased it under the corporate entity to write it off as a business expense. It was now property of Obsidian Holdings. I smiled. The seizure was absolutely flawless. Now for my parents. Elena tapped the screen, shifting the live feed from Chicago to the affluent streets of the northern suburbs. The camera angle was provided by the dash cam of the lead repossession vehicle, idling at the end of the cul-de-sac. The sprawling stone mansion of my parents looked picture-perfect in the crisp morning light. It was exactly 9 o'clock. I zoomed in on the circular driveway. 3 vehicles belonging to the friends of my mother were parked near the grand entrance. Patricia was hosting her Friday morning mimosa brunch. She was probably sitting on her custom velvet sofa, laughing politely, and sipping imported orange juice, convinced that my email was nothing more than a bluff. "Proceed," I instructed Elena. "Let us show the neighborhood who really owns that massive house." On the screen, 3 unmarked black SUVs and a marked county sheriff cruiser pulled into the pristine driveway, blocking the luxury cars of the brunch guests. The synchronized arrival was extremely aggressive. 4 county sheriffs stepped out, followed closely by a team of 6 repossession agents and a professional locksmith. They marched up the brick pathway toward the heavy mahogany doors with terrifying purpose. The lead sheriff did not bother ringing the ornate brass doorbell. He pounded his heavy fist against the wood. The sound echoed through the audio feed, a booming demand that shattered the quiet suburban morning. A few moments later, the door swung open. Richard stood in the threshold wearing a cashmere sweater and a look of profound irritation. He took one look at the uniformed officers, and his face flushed with immediate outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, stepping out onto the porch. "You are trespassing on private property. You better have a very good reason for interrupting our morning." The lead agent, a tall man with a strictly corporate demeanor, stepped forward and presented a thick blue legal folder. Richard Anderson, he stated loudly. We are executing an immediate foreclosure and asset seizure on behalf of Obsidian Holdings. The 72-hour cure period for your commercial default has expired. You are no longer the legal owners of this property. We require you and all occupants to vacate the premises immediately. This is a mistake, he stammered, the arrogant bluster evaporating from his voice. My lawyer told me this was illegal. We have rights. You cannot throw us out on the street without a court hearing. You waived your right to a hearing when you signed the commercial guarantee and pledged this unencumbered deed as collateral. The agent replied, his tone devoid of any sympathy. The transfer of ownership is legally complete. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your immediate personal effects and step off the property line. If you refuse to comply, the sheriffs will escort you off the premises by force. Behind Richard, the horrified faces of the brunch guests appeared in the foyer. Patricia pushed her way to the front, her face pale and her eyes wide with frantic terror. She was clutching a crystal mimosa flute. Richard! What is happening? She shrieked, dropping the glass. It shattered on the marble floor, but no one moved to clean it up. Who are these people? Tell them to leave. The neighbors are looking. Patricia was entirely correct. High society housewives in expensive athleisure wear were stepping out onto their manicured lawns, their phones out to record the spectacle. The pristine, untouchable image of the Anderson family was disintegrating in real time. Ma'am, the sheriff intervened, placing a hand on his duty belt. I highly suggest you cooperate. Grab your purse and a coat. The locksmith is changing the exterior locks right now. You cannot do this, Patricia screamed, lunging forward, only to be blocked by her husband. This is my home. We built this house. Chloe cannot do this to her own mother. The mention of my name caused a ripple of whispers among the brunch guests, who were frantically grabbing their coats and designer bags. They pushed past my parents, keeping their heads down as they scurried toward their blocked cars. Richard grabbed the arm of my mother, his face a mask of absolute defeat. Patricia, stop, he hissed, his voice breaking. It is over. She actually did it. She took the house. For the next 10 minutes, I watched the live feed in complete silence. My parents scrambled through the first floor of the mansion under the strict supervision of the armed sheriffs. They were not allowed upstairs. They were not allowed to pack suitcases. They were only permitted to take their wallets, cell phones, and the clothes currently on their backs. Every piece of expensive furniture, every piece of jewelry locked in the upstairs safe, every imported rug and crystal chandelier now belonged to my holding company to satisfy the debt of Vanessa. At exactly 9:15, Richard and Patricia were escorted down the brick pathway. The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind them, and the sharp metallic click of the new deadbolt echoed through the morning air. They stood on the edge of the sidewalk, completely stranded. Their luxury vehicles were locked inside the garage, which they could no longer access. They were surrounded by the very neighbors they spent decades trying to impress. Those neighbors were now watching them with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. The country club elite were witnessing the ultimate social destruction. Patricia collapsed onto the curb, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with uncontrollable sobs. Richard stood beside her, staring blankly at the house he used to rule. The suburban fortress that served as the headquarters for their narcissism was officially conquered. They gambled their entire kingdom to protect the fake lifestyle of their golden child, and they lost everything. Elena turned off the video feed and looked at me. The operation was a complete success, she confirmed quietly. I nodded slowly, picking up my cell phone. It was time for the final act. I unlocked my phone, watching the notifications flood the screen. The number of missed calls had ballooned to 98. They had spent the entire morning desperately trying to reach me, dialing frantically as their world collapsed around them. There were calls from my father, my mother Vanessa, and various extended family members who had undoubtedly been enlisted in their panic. My voicemail inbox was completely full. I navigated to the voicemail app and hit play on the most recent message. It was from my mother. Her voice, usually so composed and authoritative, was entirely unrecognizable. Chloe, please, she sobbed, the sound raw and desperate. Please pick up the phone. They took the house. The sheriffs locked us out. We are standing on the sidewalk and we have nowhere to go. Your father is having a panic attack. Vanessa lost the store. Please, Chloe. I know we made mistakes. I know we were harsh at the restaurant, but we are your family. You have to stop this. I am begging you. We will do whatever you want. Just give us back the house, please. The message ended with a jagged intake of breath and a click. I listened to it twice. I wanted to see if I felt any remorse, any lingering flicker of familial obligation. I searched myself for pity, but I found absolutely none. Her apology was entirely conditional. She was only sorry because she was standing on the curb. She was not sorry for the 33 years of emotional neglect. She was not sorry for demanding I sacrifice my financial stability. She was only sorry that the weapon she handed me was currently pointed directly at her. I opened the messaging app and selected the family group chat. The last message was my own, sent 48 hours ago. TikTok. The chat was now filled with frantic, terrified messages from my parents and sister begging for mercy, demanding answers, threatening legal action, and then begging again. I tapped the text field. I did not type an explanation. I did not offer a grand monologue about justice or karma. I did not demand an apology or revel in their destruction. I simply typed 2 words that finalized the transaction. Too late. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. I saw the read receipts pop up instantly. They were all staring at their screens, waiting for a lifeline, and I had just cut the rope. The absolute finality of those 2 words would hit them harder than any legal document or repossession notice. It was the unequivocal confirmation that the daughter they discarded had officially discarded them. I did not wait for their response. I popped the SIM tray open on my phone, extracted the tiny card, and snapped it in half. I dropped the pieces into the trash can under my desk. The silence in my office felt different now. It was not just quiet, it was completely secure. They could no longer reach me. The umbilical cord of their toxicity was permanently severed. I buzzed Elena. Arrange for a new phone and a new private number immediately, I instructed. Ensure the legal department maintains a strict barrier against any communication from the former debtors or their representatives. All correspondence must flow through official corporate channels. Elena nodded, her expression completely professional. Consider it done. The asset recovery teams confirm that both the commercial and residential properties are fully secured. We have initiated the liquidation process for the cosmetics inventory, and the residential property will be listed on the private market next week. Excellent, I said, turning back to my computer. The financial autopsy was complete. The bad debt was acquired, collateralized, and executed. It was simply another successful liquidation for Obsidian Holdings. The fact that the assets previously belonged to my family was merely a footnote in the ledger. I spent the rest of the day immersed in work, my focus razor sharp. I analyzed a potential acquisition in the tech sector, drafted a restructuring proposal for a struggling logistics firm, and led a conference call with our European partners. The high-stakes environment of corporate finance, a world my family had dismissed as boring cubicle work, was where I thrived. It was a realm governed by logic, contracts, and precise execution, entirely devoid of the emotional manipulation that had plagued my upbringing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the Chicago skyline, I packed my briefcase and prepared to leave for the weekend. The events of the past week felt surreal, a compressed timeline of confrontation and resolution that had fundamentally altered the trajectory of my life. I had walked into that anniversary dinner as the invisible, undervalued daughter. I was walking out of this week as the undisputed victor. I drove back to my penthouse, the city lights shimmering against the dark water of Lake Michigan. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, much like I had the night I sent the ultimatum. But the anticipation was gone, replaced by a profound, settling peace. The storm had passed, and the wreckage of my family's arrogance was scattered behind me. I thought about Marcus and his daughter, hoping they were safe and moving toward a more stable future. He had made the difficult choice to escape recognizing the toxicity before it completely consumed him. I had given him the opening, but he had taken the necessary steps to protect his child. That was the only variable in this entire equation that elicited any sense of satisfaction beyond the financial victory. My family, however, would face a much different reality. They would have to navigate the world without the shield of their wealth and the illusion of their superiority. They would have to experience the vulnerability they had so casually dismissed when I was struggling. They would learn that actions have severe, unyielding consequences, and that the contracts they signed were binding regardless of bloodlines. I raised my glass to the empty room, a silent toast to the execution of a flawless strategy. The debt was settled, the accounts were closed, I was finally free. The weeks following the foreclosure blurred into a highly productive sequence of corporate maneuvers. I successfully integrated the salvaged assets from the cosmetics brand into a subsidiary portfolio and finalized the sale of the suburban mansion to a prominent surgeon from the North Shore. The profit margin on the debt acquisition was staggering, further solidifying my position at the firm. I rarely thought about my family. They were a closed file, a settled account. Exactly 1 month after the eviction, I found myself in the polished minimalist lobby of a prestigious bankruptcy and restructuring law firm in downtown Chicago. I was there to finalize the dissolution of a mid-tier manufacturing company we had recently acquired. I sat in a sleek leather chair, reviewing a digital spreadsheet on my tablet, completely focused on the upcoming meeting. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. I did not look up, engrossed in the debt-to-equity ratios flashing across my screen. The sound of a familiar shrill voice cut through the quiet lobby, instantly pulling my attention away from the numbers. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Patricia complained loudly, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "I cannot believe we are being forced to wait in the lobby like common criminals. We used to golf with the senior partner of this firm." I slowly lowered my tablet. Standing by the reception desk were my parents and Vanessa. The transformation was startling. The veneer of affluent superiority had been completely stripped away. Richard wore a suit that was visibly wrinkled and slightly too large, his posture stooped. Patricia clutched a generic, unbranded handbag, her signature highlights growing out to reveal stark gray roots. Vanessa looked the most diminished, wearing plain athletic wear and hiding behind dark sunglasses, devoid of the flashy designer labels that used to define her existence. They were arguing with the receptionist, demanding immediate access to an associate attorney who apparently was running behind schedule. They looked exhausted, defeated, and profoundly bitter. I remained seated, watching them with clinical detachment. I could have easily slipped into the adjacent hallway and avoided the encounter entirely. But a part of me, the part that had endured 33 years of their relentless criticism, wanted to witness the final consequence of their actions up close. Richard turned away from the reception desk, dragging a hand across his tired face. As his gaze swept the lobby, he froze, his eyes locked onto me, sitting comfortably in the leather chair, wearing a bespoke suit and holding an expensive tablet. The color drained from his face, replaced rapidly by a dark, surging flush of anger. He nudged Patricia, who turned and gasped audibly. Vanessa lowered her sunglasses, staring at me with a mixture of shock and pure, unadulterated hatred. "Well, look who it is!" Richard sneered, his voice loud enough to turn heads. He marched across the lobby, his aggressive posture a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of authority. The prodigal daughter returns to gloat over the ruins of her family. I did not stand up. I simply locked my tablet and crossed my legs, looking up at him with mild amusement. "Hello, Richard," I replied, my voice perfectly level. "I see you are finally getting around to filing the bankruptcy paperwork. I assumed the country club lawyers were not equipped to handle a complete financial collapse." Patricia hurried over, positioning herself next to Richard like a loyal foot soldier. "You are a monster, Chloe," she hissed, her voice trembling with indignation. "You threw your own parents out on the street. You destroyed your sister's life. We are living in a cramped rental apartment in the city because of your psychopathic greed." "I took everything from you," Vanessa added, stepping out from behind our mother, her voice dripping with venom. "You manipulated the system to steal my business. You are a thief, Chloe. You are nothing but a thief who got lucky." I let them vent. I let them spew their toxic accusations, watching the receptionist discreetly signal for security. They were still clinging to the delusion that I had somehow cheated them, that their downfall was a result of my malice rather than their own profound incompetence. "Are you quite finished?" I asked quietly, cutting through their tirade. Richard slammed his hand against the armrest of the chair next to me. "Do not take that tone with me. You think you are so smart playing corporate games, but you will always be a disappointment to this family. You will always be the daughter who betrayed her own blood for a quick payout." I uncrossed my legs and stood up slowly. I was taller than Patricia and Vanessa, and I met Richard eye to eye. "I did not betray my blood," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, authoritative register. "I executed a legal contract that you willingly signed." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a slim manila folder. I had intended to use these documents during my restructuring meeting, but they served a much better purpose here. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and held it up. "You still do not understand, do you?" I asked, looking at their confused faces. "You still think Obsidian Holdings is just some faceless corporation that swooped in to take your house? You think I am just an employee who pulled some strings to get you evicted?" I handed the paper to Richard. He snatched it from my hand, his eyes scanning the text. It was the official corporate registration for Obsidian Holdings. "Read the name of the sole managing member and majority shareholder," I instructed. Richard stared at the paper. His hands began to shake. He read the name, then read it again, his lips moving silently. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, horrifying realization. Patricia grabbed the paper from his hands. She read the highlighted section, and a sharp gasp escaped her lips. "It was you," Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. "You are Obsidian Holdings. You are the creditor." "That is correct," I said smoothly. "I did not just work for the company that bought your debt. I am the company. I personally authorized the acquisition of Vanessa's failing portfolio. I personally signed the foreclosure notices. I personally ordered the repossession of your estate. I was not a bystander in your destruction. I was the architect." The silence in the lobby was absolute. The final pillar of their arrogance shattered into a million pieces. They realized in that moment that they had not been defeated by a faceless corporation. They had been systematically, legally, and ruthlessly dismantled by the very daughter they had deemed worthless. Vanessa stared at me, her mouth hanging open, unable to articulate the depth of her shock. Richard looked as if he might be physically ill. The power dynamic had completely inverted, and they were completely powerless to change it. "My restructuring meeting is about to begin," I said, retrieving the document from Patricia's limp hand. "I highly recommend you listen carefully to your bankruptcy attorneys today. You are going to need excellent legal counsel to navigate the massive tax liabilities associated with the foreclosure." I turned and walked toward the conference room doors, leaving them standing in the lobby, utterly broken and completely destitute. The final confrontation was over, and the victory was absolute. What a wonderful story, isn't it? I stepped out of the bankruptcy firm, the satisfying click of the glass doors sealing my family behind me. The crisp Chicago air hit my face, bracing and clean. I hailed a cab, giving the driver an address in the quieter residential district of Lincoln Park. I had one final piece of business to conclude before I could truly close this chapter. Marcus was waiting for me at a small, unassuming coffee shop. He sat in a corner booth, a toddler asleep in a stroller beside him. He looked tired, the stress of the past month etched into the lines around his eyes, but there was also a quiet resilience in his posture. He was no longer the man trapped in the sinking ship of Vanessa's delusions. "Thank you for meeting me, Chloe," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. He kept his voice low, glancing protectively at his sleeping daughter. I ordered a black coffee and looked at him. "How is the divorce proceeding?" I asked, getting straight to the point. "It is messy," Marcus admitted, running a hand over his face. "Vanessa is fighting tooth and nail for custody, but her financial situation is a complete disaster. The documentation of her draining the college fund was the nail in the coffin. My lawyer says the judge is highly likely to grant me primary physical custody, given her instability and lack of resources." "And your personal finances?" I inquired, my tone analytical. I managed to salvage my savings, he said. The injunction you advised me to file saved me from the commercial fallout. But replacing the $50,000 she stole from her college fund, that is going to take years. It breaks my heart knowing she took that from her own child. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a certified cashier's check. I slid it across the table face down. Marcus looked at the check, then up at me, confusion knitting his brow. "What is this?" he asked. I took a sip of my coffee. "I acquired Vanessa's debt portfolio for a fraction of its face value," I explained. "When I liquidated her assets and sold the primary collateral, my parents' estate, the profit margin was substantial. Consider this a redistribution of those assets." Marcus slowly turned the check over. His eyes widened and he let out a sharp, incredulous breath. The check was made out to him in the amount of $100,000. "Chloe, I cannot accept this," he stammered, his hands hovering over the paper. "This is too much. I only asked for a loan. It is not a loan," I stated firmly. "50,000 is to replace the college fund Vanessa stole. Put it in an irrevocable trust that she cannot access under any circumstances. The other 50,000 is for your legal fees and living expenses while you secure full custody." I leaned forward, making sure he understood my intent. "I am not doing this out of charity, Marcus. I am doing this because your daughter is the only innocent party in this entire situation. She should not have to pay the price for the narcissism of my family. Protect her from Vanessa. Make sure she grows up knowing her own worth, not chasing fake status on the internet." Marcus stared at the check, tears welling in his eyes. He reached across the table and grasped my hand, his grip firm and filled with profound gratitude. "Thank you, Chloe. I promise you she will never be like them. I will protect her." I nodded, withdrawing my hand gently. "That is all I ask." I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. I walked out of the cafe, leaving Marcus to begin his new life. The final loose end was tied. The innocent were protected, and the guilty were facing the consequences of their actions. I walked toward the lakefront, the wind whipping through my hair. The city of Chicago stretched out before me, a sprawling landscape of concrete glass and endless possibility. For 33 years, I had carried the weight of my family's expectations, their criticisms, and their profound disappointment. I had spent my life trying to prove my worth to people who were fundamentally incapable of seeing it. They had demanded my sacrifice. They had threatened to disown me if I did not surrender my hard-earned stability to save a sister who despised me. They thought they were issuing an ultimatum. They did not realize they were handing me the key to my own cage. When I clicked send on that email, I did not just acquire a debt portfolio. I acquired my freedom. I dismantled the false narrative they had built around me. I proved that the daughter they dismissed as a failure was the only one capable of wielding true power. I stopped by the edge of the lake, watching the waves crash against the concrete barriers. The water was dark and turbulent, but the horizon was clear. The anger that had fueled my 20s was gone. The resentment that had simmered during family dinners was extinguished. The desire to prove them wrong had vanished entirely. They were no longer my problem. They were a liquidated asset, a closed account, a lesson learned. I had taken their power, dismantled their empire, and evicted them from my life permanently. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was a new device, a new number, completely untethered from the past. I opened my contacts. There was no mom, no dad, no Vanessa. The list was clean, populated only by the people who mattered: my colleagues, my legal team, the network I had built through my own competence and determination. I looked back at the city skyline, the towering buildings reflecting the afternoon sun. I was Chloe. I was a liquidator. I was the architect of my own life. They had demanded I pay the price, and I had simply collected the debt. The air was cold, but I had never felt warmer. I turned away from the lake and walked back toward the financial district. I had a company to run, assets to acquire, and a life to live entirely on my own terms. The past was foreclosed. The future was mine. These narratives highlight a profound truth. Blood does not guarantee loyalty. Walking away from a toxic family isn't an act of surrender, it is the ultimate form of self-preservation. When those who should protect you choose to manipulate, diminish, or abandon you instead, you owe it to yourself to sever those destructive ties. Your true worth is never defined by conditional approval or a desperate need to maintain a perfect facade. It is built on resilience, self-respect, and the courage to forge an independent path. Take back your power and build a life where you are truly valued. Share one firm boundary you have set to protect your peace in the comments below.